Charlotte is a fan favorite from Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, so it makes sense that she made her way to War of the Visions. So as a lightning magic tank, she's going to pair very well with the upcoming Cloud from the Final Fantasy VII Remake collaboration, but will she finally end Helena's reign of terror, please? Charlotte is a 90 cost lightning unit with the new job, Knight of the Sacred Shield. Now this is based off of Sacred Shield Charlotte from Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, who was also a magic tank. Charlotte also has the Monk and Thief subjobs, which aren't spectacular, but they offer some okay passives for her kit. She also can equip swords and your typical tank gear of armor, helm, and accessories, plus shields. Now speaking of shields, her TMR is a shield, and this TMR has high HP, it has some spirit. It also comes with a one-use ability that is a 35% all damage mitigation barrier that also restores your AP, and it works for the first 3 times that Charlotte's going to take damage. Now this sounds really good for Charlotte, who doesn't have a barrier on her kit, but unfortunately there's actually not that many other units that have shields. In fact, all the other units with shields also have the Saint's Wall buff because they're physical tanks, and that's a 50% mitigation barrier for physical attacks. Now it doesn't have the AP regeneration, but I think most units would probably want to use that. So right now, Charlotte is the main person that's going to want to equip her TMR, but that's okay. So her master ability has the typical lightning HP and lightning attack boost for your party and herself. It's also going to give her 10 spirit as well as another 5% HP boost. And then finally, I just want to note that Charlotte is going to have a pity in the Mog shop, so if you have enough Visior, you can guarantee that you get her. There's not a lot to say about Charlotte's stats. Her HP is high because she's a tank, but it's actually about 500 lower than King Mont, Wall, and Rain at 4,718. Her agility is high, and not just for a tank, it's high at 64, so that's very good. Her AP is lower than other tanks at 19, but it's not going to be a huge deal. The only tank with massive AP that's not like a magic damage dealer like Rain is King Mont, and he starts with like 27, so we can't compare everybody to King Mont. He has an AP node that gives him some initial starting AP. So if you were wondering if you want to take Charlotte all the way to 115 versus 120, I'm gonna have to recommend that you take her all the way to 120. And you're gonna look at the stat chart and think, well, there's not that much of a difference, but there is 518 HP, and I think tanks just need to stack all the HP they possibly can. She doesn't really receive any other massive stat boosts, but she does get a very good job level 25 skill. As for Charlotte's resists, well, she's weak to earth and she's strong against water. Her magic resist is very high at 20%, and she also gets 10% to slash and missile. Unfortunately, she has a negative 10% weakness to pierce attacks and then a negative 5% for strike. So these resists are overall not a problem. Slash and magic are the most important resists in the game, and she has a good starting point for both. Her status ailment resists include a 50% to Berserk and to Toad. Watch out, Mish. Now that's seriously though, the Berserk is a pretty big deal for combating with King Mont, and then there's other sources of Berserk as well. So she also has a 10% boost to paralysis resistance. Now it's time to take a look at Charlotte's kit, and again, I may skip some skills. For Charlotte's new job, I'm going to talk about everything. But for her sub jobs, I might not talk about every single skill because I'm just going to go over what I think is important. So starting with passives, she has 2 new passives from her main job that we will talk about. So the first one is called the Knight of the Sacred Shield, and it grants 50% defense and spirit debuff resists. Now, how this works is there's a 50% chance that the debuff won't happen. So if you look at something like Orlando's Armor Crush, whatever it's called in this game, that is going to either happen or not happen. It doesn't reduce the amount of damage, or defense that it takes off of a unit. Now, defense and spirit can go into the negative when we're talking about these debuffs. So having it is really important for a tank, even if they don't have that stat to begin with, like Charlotte, who doesn't have defense. So she's actually going to be able to cap this debuff resistance at 100% with a TP skill in battle. So you'll use the 2 as a combination to just have a full resistance to any sort of spirit or defense debuff. So this is definitely something, depending on the opponent, that will be pretty important to use. She also has Noble Spirit, which is going to increase her HP by 12% and Spirit by 12. This is an easy equip for most battles. And then otherwise you might consider Thief Lore for the agility up and the move +1. The mobility is always important for a tank. And then HP up level 1 is also very effective. It could be a good replacement for Knight of the Sacred Shield if debuffs aren't a concern for you, and Charlotte does get a lot of HP for 15% just because, you know, in EX jobs our base stats become so big. As for counters, there's only one counter that you're going to use in Charlotte's kit, and that's going to be her new Immortal General counter. So this is going to counter magic damage specifically and gives her 10 additional spirit. With her EX job, the proc chance for this goes up to 30% from 20, and that's pretty decent. Next, let's talk about Knight of the Sacred Shield and the main skills that she will always have equipped. So Attract Wall is going to grant hate for Charlotte and increase her defense and spirit debuff resist. Now you're just going to use this for the hate anyway, but if you pair it with the passive, then you'll have that 100% defense and spirit debuff resist. Then she has Stunning Edge, which is a Blade Bash with less potency but more range. Noble Armor is going to increase her defense and spirit for 3 turns and grant regen. Now, upgraded in EX job will then give you Protect and Shell, which is just massive. So defense, spirit, regen, protect, and shell, that is crazy, and it means that she's going to be able to take any type of damage. She also has Lightning Slash, which is a 38% lightning in peril, a 210% potency, and reduces the chance of counters activating by 100% for 3 turns. That's crazy. Unfortunately, it only has a 1 square range. Fortunately, Charlotte is a tank, which means that people will be coming to her. Speed Punish is a 165% potency AoE, which also decreases agility by 25% for 3 turns. That is a very solid skill, and it's an AoE for her. If your team is fast enough to take advantage of this, then you could actually, you know, bump some turns and go faster than your opponent. At job level 25, Charlotte is going to get access to Grandshelt Wall, a TP skill that increases all of your attack resists by 8% for herself and her allies that are standing right next to her. So every percent counts. I can't stress that enough. This is like equipping a +5 armor on everybody during the battle, and just every type of +5 armor that gives you the 8% damage type resist. So I really love this skill. It's definitely worth going to job level 25 for. Then we can take a look at the sub-skills for her job, and you get Blessing of the Holy Fort, which increases your lightning, water, and dark resist by 20% for 3 turns, and it has a nice big range around Charlotte. This is instant cast, and the dark resist here is very appetizing. This will be much easier to use than King Want's all resist buff, and the ability to buff your team up so that they can take some damage from Helena is something that is highly anticipated. So Paralyzed Blade is a 3 square sweep in front of Charlotte that has a chance of paralyzing your opponents for 3 turns. Now, Charlotte doesn't actually have a lot of range aside from Speed Punish, so this sweep skill, it could actually be pretty good. These skills with the 3 square sweep are surprisingly useful for hitting diagonal squares, so I have my eye on this one. I think it's actually pretty good. Charlotte's Limit Burst is very impressive. It boasts a massive AoE and has a 39% attack and magic break for 3 turns. It also acts as a sentinel, giving Charlotte 40 defense and spirit for 1 turn after using it. So even though it has a 200% potency, Charlotte's likely not going to be stacking enough attack for this to do a lot of damage. But I will say that increasing the level of this Limit Burst is important because it increases all parameters, including the defense and spirit buff, so it's definitely a Limit Burst that you want to max. Now, I'm not going to go into great depth in the Monk and Thief sub-jobs. I don't think there's a lot to talk about here. In manual play, the sub-Monk might be useful because it has that store 150% attack boost, and being able to plan that could be very useful for you, but just in auto, I don't think it's reliable at all, especially because you want her to be using her defensive buffs instead. Let's compare Charlotte to other tanks, and stat-wise, she's pretty similar. She has higher than average agility, but she has lower HP than the other tanks we're going to be looking at. Now, her main competition for magic tanking is Rain, and although Rain can passively stack high spirit and high magic resist, Charlotte's agility, paired with her mobility and paired with her phenomenal in-battle buffs, makes her just more enticing than Rain. She has more slash resist than him, and then access to defense boosts and also protect. I think that just makes her a more well-rounded tank, but still able to take all that magic damage. Now, Charlotte's not going to be the best physical tank in the game, but she should be able to take a hit or two. She has no access to defense innately, but she can stack defense and resists through equipment espers and VCs if need be, and then her TP skills are going to grant defense and protect, and the all attack resist as well. So I think that she's going to be a pretty well-rounded tank that specializes in magic tanking, but is going to be better than Rain at taking that physical damage. One demerit for Charlotte is that she doesn't have access to the same game-changing status ailments like other comparable tanks. King Mont has Disable and Berserk, Rain has Slow and Move Down, and Wall has Stop. Now, this isn't a deal breaker for Charlotte, just an observation that I'm making. Charlotte has access to defensive buffs that none of the other aforementioned tanks have, and I think that's going to make her a tough nut to crack. Let's talk pros and cons for Charlotte. So the first pro is that she's just very strong against magic damage, but also magic base damage because she has a high spirit stat. She also doesn't need an agility TMR to keep up with the battle, and I think that's pretty important. When I use Rain, I always have to put a TMR on him that gives him some agility because he's just so slow. So between her defense and spirit buffs, her protect and shell, her regen, her TMR barrier, she's just ready for all types of damage, and I think that's pretty much making her the best universal tank at this point for any type of damage. And then finally, her Lightning Imperil is going to make her very useful for PvE and possibly live PvP for setup turns. It's a big deal to have that on a regular skill. As for cons, Charlotte would love her own TMR, but she'd also make use of bells in order to activate her LB more easily. Her debuff resist is strong against breaks, but it does not help against penetration one bit. We also have to watch out for Dispel for the defense and spirit buffs, and for the barrier breaks for her TMR. Now, the Dispel, as far as I know, doesn't take away Protect and Shell, and that's a really big plus for Charlotte. Otherwise, her range is limited in terms of her attacks, and she's also missing powerful status effects on her attacks. So she really is there to soak up damage and then empower your other lightning units, but she's not going to be changing the whole match by, you know, putting Berserk on everybody or slowing down your units like Mont and Rain will. So should you pull for Charlotte? I think she's going to be great for a lot of players, especially if you don't have a magic tank. But even if you have Rain, I think that she's kind of an upgrade on him. So there really is a lot of wiggle room for people to add her to their box. So I think generally, unless you're just feeling really good about your tanks, then yeah, you should pull for Charlotte. Otherwise, she's going to be in the regular pool. You can get her later and you can slow build her. You could even pull her now and then slow build her, however you like to do that. But you can be sure that when you do build her, you are getting a very strong unit with capabilities to take all types of damage, especially magic-based damage. So definitely a pull for me. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to be pulling, because I am in fact going to be skipping, but that's just the way that my account is set up. I'm very happy with how I have magic and physical tanks, so I don't need to pull for her right now, but I will be very happy to get her in the future. So that's going to be it for the video. Hope it was useful to you, and if it was, you can let me know in the comments down below. You can also let me know by subscribing to the channel to stay up to date on all the latest Mysidian content, and then otherwise, I'll see you in the next video, and I'll see you on my Discord in the War of the Visions channel, which I love to check in on. So please come join us and we will get to chatting.